out the hand, switch, shooters on swoosh, hitters don't miss. Already just added a ton of y'all to my list. Bitch, death wish, not to be messed with, tested quiz. They shooting shots, hitting bricks, we testing the kids.
Welcome to Deep Thrones, the most entertaining podcast in the world of Ice and Fire. I'm your host, Sims. My partner, Sheedy's here. What's up, Sheets?
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing?
We are cooking, man. We're doing fantastic. We're a week removed from House of the Dragon, and I know we kind of have that Sunday night itch. Or I guess by the time you hear that, that Monday morning itch.
For
How
Deep
how are you
Thrones.
feeling with for Deep Thrones? Yeah, how are you feeling post mortem on House of the Dragon? Are we clear of it? Or are we still lingering? What's going on?
We talked about this a little bit last on the Deeper Thrones, which is like as much as the finale was such a buzzkill, like I liked the season overall, and I'm excited for season three. It's so far away that I think, especially the amount of work we put into the pod, it's good to kind of compartmentalize it, really enjoy it for what it was. I'll rewatch the entire series probably in about half a year or so, and then I tend to get excited again. Like I can watch
Oh yeah.
it's like season 8 of Game of Thrones. Like I can watch that and find things that I'm like, yeah, for what it was great. I'm not comparing at all House of Dragon season 2, but yeah, I'm clear of it. I'm looking forward to Dunk and Egg, but I'm also looking forward to like a little off season.
Yeah, so we'll have this Dunkin' Egg look ahead, which is our 99th episode, and then our next episode, which will come to you again Monday morning, will be the 100th episode, and we're doing the Thronies, big extravaganza. We're gonna be super pumped, and not just Sheedy and I. I mean, everyone listening. I hear many people talking about the Thronies 100th episode.
Many big people. We're rolling out the red carpet. There's rumors that certain celebrities might be there. They also might not be. They probably, who knows? Who knows? We
Who
sent out the
knows?
invites, but I would, so we can't control who shows up and who doesn't show up, but they could. So you're going to want to tune in and listen because there might be a surprise guest and there also might not be. So
Speaking of that 100th episode, follow us at Deep Thrones Pod on Instagram. And while you're at it, do it on TikTok and X as well. But on the Instagram account, we will have a poll up this week. It's going to be a Q&A. So any unanswered questions that you had from House of the Dragon season 2, or even if you just want to open it up to some Dunk and Egg questions too, we'll get into that later on this episode. But yeah, we'll have the Q&A and shoot some questions in there, and then we'll answer them on our 100th episode on the Thronies.
the fan competition is also still up. Be sure to share Deep Thrones Pod's logo to your IG story and be like, "Hey, number one fan," and then DM us telling us why you should be the number one fan to be entered for a chance to win a Deep Thrones Pod hat. And I just want to say, 100 episodes. I can distinctly remember creating the podcast with you, Chris, like us coming up with everything, and we did a it's from incubation to recording the first episode was like 4 to 5 months. And then we recorded it, and then the floodgates opened. They didn't think we could make it to 30, and we're approaching 100.
Well, let's talk about that first one we recorded. People don't That one never made it to air
That's right.
because yeah.
We didn't know we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't have microphones. We didn't have anything. We recorded over PlayStation, and it still exists somewhere. Like I still have that somewhere. I'm sure of it because I keep everything digital, like a digital hoarder. And there were like Call of Duty zombie noises in the background because my brain said, well, even if I'm recording on PlayStation, if I mute the TV, it does makes no sense that my brain thought that that's how that would work. But here we are. So technically, we're already at 100, I guess. But here we are, approaching.
Wow, yeah.
That one doesn't count.
You
A
know what's
hundred.
interesting though is that actually would have played the zombie noises in the background would have played well if we were like covering season 8 of Game of Thrones
I
and
know.
the White Walkers were very much in play.
We were just ahead of our time. I didn't even know zombies were in the show at the time. After the first episode, I was like, "What were those things?" You were like, "Just watch." But I do want to say I'm gonna go back and listen to the entire pod all the way through. I want to hear the arc, like our entire journey from kind of not being good to sounding good is going to be interesting, but also just the jokes to the jokes that have upset my parents along the way. I'm really excited.
I mean, look at how far we've come. We have a band being made out of this. We've
Dude,
got we've got a number one fan competition, and people are really making some strong cases as to why they should be number one fan of Deep Thrones.
Matt Conrad made a strong case, who was a guest of the pod, who you also said was the number one fan, which started this. Hannah, who was a guest of the pod. Rob, who many of you have heard his name. He's funded the pod. He's never been a guest. But I do. We actually came up with something, Chris, that we were just going to do this thing where Rob recorded an intro and we just cut it in. And it's the exact verbatim intro. Like, and it's just, winter is here, but it's Rob's voice, just to see if anyone was like, who was that? What was that? Just once and never bring it up again. Never talk about it, but we didn't do it.
Man, we should have done it, but now we've spilt the beans.
It's all right. I'll cut it in next season. No one will know. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. But we are very busy boys coming up, so we're excited for the off season. But our Instagram is going to stay very active. So send us anything you want. We're very excited, and we're also very animated and talking with our hands if you're watching on YouTube. But Chris, I've never read these books. So this is going back to authentic Deep Thrones, where I had no clue what was going on. So we're bringing back two classic segments, Westeros History Minute and Thrones for Dummies, which is when I get to ask Chris a question about Thrones. So very excited for this because Chris, what is Dunk and Egg? What is a hedge knight? What is a knight of the seven? What's the seven kingdoms? What's a knight? What is
Yeah.
a hedge knight?
What's a night? Well, I'm not going to answer all those questions in one sitting here, but we're very excited for this series, and there's a lot to be excited about. A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is a series of novellas written by George R. R. Martin that is the subject of a new HBO show that's scheduled to premiere in spring 2025. So we won't have to wait a full 2 years before we get some World of Ice and Fire content, which is awesome. But yeah, it's about a knight called Sir Duncan the Tall, who ends up being a legendary knight throughout lore of A Song of Ice and Fire. But in this story, it's very much a, start from the bottom and now we're here sort of deal, right? So it's
Hell
very cool
yeah.
to follow this arc of, poor hedge knight. A hedge knight is someone who is a knight because he has a horse and he was knighted by someone along his path, right? But has no lord to serve. He has no money. He usually has very low rate sword and armor and things like that. But a lot of these lesser lords need hedge knights or sell swords or whatever to be able to fight for them in their petty squabbles. So
Mhm.
this is where we find Dunk starting off, and then he runs into a little boy named Egg and ends up being a squire and kind of follows the adventures of these two throughout the story.
Very excited. I also want to say something really quick because you said started from the bottom, now we're here. You said egg, and it made me immediately think about my band. I don't know if I've told you guys I have a band called Aegon's Fallen Angels. And even the lighting in my room, there's sort of like a ray of light coming
There
down
is
on me. I
actually. Where's
sort of look like a fallen angel a little bit. And of course, being the lead singer, creator, and founder of that band is very exciting. Allison, My Blood Runs Green is a top hit. I can't wait. I might have to write some songs for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which is based on this novella. Couple things before we get deeper into the ins and outs of this story. The book Hedge Knight, which is what A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms is based on, the first novella of this series, is
Mhm.
160 pages, right? George's other books, which would cover a season of Game of Thrones, were about like season one would cover the first book essentially, was 10 episodes, 160 pages, and it's 6 episodes. So that tracks because George's first book is probably what, 400 or 500 pages, right?
Yeah, about 500 pages.
So this is perfect. It's all they need is six. Unlike like you heard us mad about House of the Dragon being eight. That's valid, and we're going to continue to be. This is different. This makes a lot of sense. This is going to be. It looks like source material, source material, source material for 6 episodes, and there's no big epic kabooms. Like I mean, there are. I shouldn't say that, but it's not like dragon fighting. It's more about, like Chris said, Dunk and his Squire Egg. And the 6 episodes make sense. Anything more, people would be pissed at how slowly paced it is. So the six, I feel like, is a perfect amount.
Yeah, and I was rereading the first book of the series as we got ready for this episode, and I got re-excited for it and reinvigorated. I hadn't revisited this series because I was so much effort into House of the Dragon that I was rereading Fire and Blood and A World of Ice and Fire and things like that. Diving into this smaller scale story was refreshing in a sense. It wasn't as Oh my gosh, like we're keeping track of all these people on the Green Council and the Black Council and what their tie-ins are and who what kind of land troops they have and how many dragons they have. Like this is you're paying attention to the struggles and tribulations of one central character plus another character that's added on that are very complex to begin with, but again, you're not tracking like, oh man, what's this person's name and blah blah blah. So it is a lot more granular, but it makes it more fun to follow in a sense,
I
if that makes sense.
I agree. I love, and George in his blog, I think, tried to placate people. He's like, listen, for those of you who are big Game of Thrones fans and House of the Dragon, he's like, it's a different vibe. And in my head, I thought, George, anyone who's reading your blog already knows that. Like, there's no casual viewer of Game of Thrones like, let's see what George R. R. Martin's blog is up to. Like we know Night of the Seven Kingdoms is going to be a completely different vibe. There's still bloodshed. There's still treachery. It's still Game of Thrones. It's still Westeros. You know what I mean? But it's
Hmm.
going to be a smaller scale. Like we're going to be following this hedge knight named Dunk. Hopefully he's, like you said, started from the bottom. Now he's here kind of situation. We're going to see where he goes. We're going to see what's up with his egg character. Let me ask you this, without giving anything away, the relationship between Dunk and Egg. Is it like, come under my wing, guy? Like, I'll teach you some things. Are they buddy buddy? Is there friction? Is it like us, where we really don't talk outside of this podcast, strictly professional?
Well, that's a lie for those
It
listening who
is.
don't know us.
We're great pals.
But it is Dunk is, he's from Flea Bottom, literally was a runt of the litter and was taken in by an older hedge knight who kind of showed him the ways and actually was a lot more chivalrous than a lot of these high lords that we meet in Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. So that's kind of the background on Dunk. That being said, being from that lower caste, right? He's very distrustful of people that he meets, and for good reason. Like we've all seen what happens when you blindly trust people in this world that is Westeros. So to start off, the relationship between Dunk and Egg was not great. And it almost wasn't a relationship because of that distrust. But then as time goes on, and we'll see throughout these first six episodes, I would probably guess like episode two or three, they probably buddy up and start to trust each other, at least in some sense. And then eventually their interests align and they end up becoming a lot more trusting and buddy with each other.
Well, their relationship gets fixed. I did one of the scripts actually leaked, and in episode 3, their relationship gets mended because Dunk dresses up like a Septa and sneaks into the Septa. He sneaks into the Septa Baelor, and him and Egg hash it out.
Hmm.
It's really good conversation.
And
Come
they
on.
talk about the Song of Ice and
They
Fire,
talk
and
about this.
they,
Doug is like, it's my job to continue the Targaryen line and to protect people so that you can make sure that the Long Night doesn't, or something doesn't, like, so that Arya Stark can kill the ice guy.
yeah. This is like there are still larger than life characters and new houses that we'll meet, which was something that I thought was cool in House of the Dragon. But it's
Agreed.
all like a very more personalized touch to it. Like when you meet, Lord Ashford or
Sir Arlen.
Lionel Sir Arlen of Pennytree or like a Lionel Baratheon whose nickname is the Laughing Storm. Like you get a full like personalized character look at these people and not like, oh, it's just some troops with banners marching and you see Ashford banners. Like no, like
It's
you're going to have face-to-face conversations with these people, and I think we're going to learn to love new characters in a more personalized way.
definitely, it's really humbling too when like they release the character. A lot of castings have happened, and
Hmm.
they've been filming. I mean, we already see, we're going to get a teaser, I would guess, in 2 months' time, right? A teaser is the short trailer, followed by the big trailer will probably be around Christmas, and it'll probably come out, my guess, March, April. But I sent Chris like the cast list. They're playing characters, and I think I know this world pretty good at this point. Never heard of any of these people. And Chris is like, "Oh, I can't wait to see the characterization of this guy and that guy." And I'm just like, "Yeah, me too, man. I'm looking forward to it." So that's where
Dude,
I
that
like it
one,
gets me hyped.
I know exactly the post you're talking about. That got me so hyped when they had both Fossaways on
Foss,
there.
that's it. That was it. Fossaway. I never even heard the
Dude,
name.
Red apple and green apple frostaways. Come on, you don't tease me.
So
Um,
160 pages, 6 episodes. That to me is the episodes are an hour. They should be. I bet some episodes will, like House of the Dragon, bleed over an hour.
mhm,
But six for 160 compared to the Game of Thrones route seems like so much. Like we're gonna get good character development in these 6 episodes. I think you guys will love it. Like this will be, I think, a harken back to old Game of Thrones where it's like really developed characters that you care about. It's just a different vibe. It's not the King's Landing politics. It's a guy who's just like, hey, I'll make a few bucks fighting as a knight and dunk, the obviously for those of you who are learned in the world, his journey is just beginning where we're seeing it, and he goes on to be
mhm,
somebody, you know?
mhm. And there's a lot of twists and turns along the way that I think are going to be exciting. The one thing that, as I was rereading, I'm kind of like, uh-oh. And it's not anything that I like or dislike. People are just so impatient nowadays
Oh
that,
no.
like, as I was like reading this, I'm like, okay, like this is like I'm super into this and like hearing about these different places that they're stopping at. And it's kind of like Game of Thrones early on when journeys meant something and you like kind of
Mhm.
go to these different inns and meet these different people. And in my head, I'm like, man, I could just picture getting the text mid-episode, like, oh my God, is something gonna happen?
Because
Um,
it's a slow burn, a lot of travel.
mhm.
They're getting, are you saying, are you thinking this would be an end of the season thing where it's a cliffhanger for season two for the
No,
second novella?
absolutely
It's a
not. No, no,
mid-season thing
no.
you're saying they're going to be angry about?
This would be maybe like episode 2, and people are gonna be like, "Oh my God, like we're sitting through this again."
Yeah.
But no, this is there's no cliffhanger at the end. Like these seasons are gonna be fully told stories,
Yeah.
which is cool. Like we're gonna get, the first 3 seasons are gonna be 3 different books, that are 3 different stories. Like they're not continuous, right? Like
Yeah.
season one's gonna be a story that's maybe 3 or 4 years away from season two. But the beauty of that is we're going to get a complete storyline that has a beginning and has an end, as opposed to having to wait until 2 years later for a climax of a situation.
And then season two is the continuation of their journey, but not at the end of season one. It's sort of the next big event in their lives, which is pretty
Hmm.
cool. So season one will take place about 90 years before Game of Thrones, about that. So we
Hmm.
are getting close to this is the Targaryen dynasty, sort of at the roller coaster's heading down now, you know? Are there
Yes,
dragons aren't in the world anymore? Are dragons still in the world?
there are no longer dragons in the world. Sad.
Sad.
R.I.P. And the good news is the Targaryen family, though, is not lacking for any heirs at this point in time. So it is a very large family. We actually have some crossover, unlike House of the Dragon, where there's no characters that we see from Game of Thrones to House of the Dragon. In A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, we're gonna have some crossover between, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
one or two characters that at least we might have heard of in Game of Thrones to that series. So it'll be cool. There'll be some cool tie-ins, and the state of the Targaryen house at this time is kind of on the uprise. Like we see it, without spoilers, right? Like is
They're
House of the
returning it
Dragon.
to glory a
House,
little bit.
yeah, House of the Dragon is a civil war, so you can kind of picture how that depletes a house, right? So now we're kind of seeing more heirs, more Targaryens, and they're all unified. So a good state of the Targaryen house, not as strong as it was at the beginning of House of the Dragon,
Right.
but better than it was at the end of the Dance of Dragons Civil War.
And were there any BF rebellions going on at this around this time? BF rebellions, for those of you who don't know, are what really cool
Blackfire
people,
rebellions,
what cool
yes.
people call them. Yeah.
Uh,
You got any
so
BFRs? Are there any BFRs going on?
for those who are just learning and tuning in to us to get their information, Blackfires are a kind of offshoot of House Targaryen that were made after Daemon Blackfire was a bastard son of an Aegon who was legitimized.
So
But
many
anyways,
Aegons.
yes, they're okay. Before I answer your question, there were about 5, I think, Blackfire rebellions in canon. So
Hell yeah.
this storyline does kind of fall in between one of those. So without saying too much,
It's
Yes.
I forgot we were recording the pod. I thought this was the episode we were doing just to educate me on because I have no clue. Like this is all new to me. So that sort of sets the scene for you guys. The story starts off in the Reach, right?
Hmm.
Which is you think Reach, you think House Tyrell, you think the High Towers for House of the
Yeah.
Dragon fans. It's the lower left side of the Westeros map if you're looking at it. The western coast underneath the Westerlands, and it starts there. And again, these are not powerful people. It's just a guy.
And another
Just
thing, I'm glad you brought that up. The Reach, you also think about tremendous amounts of wealth,
oh
right?
yeah,
You think about a lot of chivalry, like I don't know if we look at Game of Thrones, Mace Tyrell and Loras Tyrell, right? Like those guys were, spend a ton of money on tourneys and then just like show up in ornate armor and things like that. So like that's what you're getting in the Reach, and a lot of that's reflected off of like the poorness and you know desperation of Dunk at the time. So it's a cool dynamic, and Dunk's just trying to make a name for himself amongst these like larger than life, richer than rich characters.
when I think of finery, and also when I think of the knighthood, I think of two areas: the Vale and I think of the Reach. Like for some
Hmm.
reason, I know I know the North didn't really do knights, but I know like the Vale, of course, because the Knights of the Vale. But like you said, the Reach also just comes to mind because first off, insane amounts of wealth because that's where all the food grows. But secondly, like I feel like you said, Loras shows up, Battle of the Blackwater, and he's donning, fancy armor and
Roses everywhere.
roses everywhere. I mean,
Mm.
Lady Olenna she was dripping. Her and Simon Strong would have loved each other. All right.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But
But it's exciting stuff, and we'll see some houses that we never saw before. So it's always fun in my mind where we kind of flesh out this world and make it what it really is. But I am excited. You'll see the best of the best Targaryens as far as good chivalry character goes, and you'll see the worst of the worst that are reminiscent of, Viserys, Daenerys's brother.
it's what makes House Targaryen great is
Hmm.
you have your Rhaegars and you have Rhaegar's dad,
Hmm.
which is but I just want to say I do hope this is not a history book like House of the Dragon source material. This is like a Game of Thrones book where it is fleshed out and you see the journey. So I do hope the showrunners, for the most part, I know there will be things here or there. I hope they stick to the source material. And based on the castings we've seen, they're not really messing around. Like everybody's getting casted. Every name you've
Yeah,
seen, they just dropped. They've dropped like six along the way, seven, eight, and then just the other day there was like eight where they were like, all right, and then there's these eight now. So
that's a
they're
great point, and that really makes you believe that they're going to take the right steps here. Even with House of the Dragon casting, we were like, oh, how come this character's not been casted, or maybe they're saving this for like later on.
for two.
You're
Where's
right.
Daron? Where's
Yeah.
Daron? Yeah, go
Like,
ahead. Sorry.
but no, but you're absolutely right. Like they are not like everyone in the story of the Hedge Knight book has been casted, which is awesome.
You almost like if they nail this, this would be a big win for HBO. You know what I mean? If they stick to the
Mhm.
source material, they nail these Targaryens, they get, Dunk, people like Dunk, people like Egg, and then this one they could roll in. I'm curious to see if they do 2 years for this too, because it's like doesn't feel like they need to, but they might just so that they don't double dip.
Yeah, and kind of keep alternating. I think the 2 year might also be intentional so that they could slide a third one in toward the end of House of the Dragon as well.
Yes, I bet so. I bet so. We haven't heard anything else. George obviously talked about all the other things. In development means nothing. Until it's in production, it means nothing. HBO's not giving any money until it's in production.
Mhm. Any other questions that you had for me? Because I actually highlighted an excerpt from the Hedge Knight that I wanted to close out with.
I love that. We'll close out with that. One last thing I'll ask you.
Hmm.
Excitement level. Where does this rank for you? Now, I'm not giving you like a 1 to 10. It's hard to say. We were really excited for House of the Dragon. Obviously, excitement now has turned to cautious optimism for season three. But we're talking about, Game of Thrones ending level and House of the Dragon. Like, where does Duncan Egg rank for you? Rank for you in the shit from Westeros you've read, and you in like how you feel it'll be, and then go into your excerpt.
Listen, that's a difficult question to answer because they're such different vibes. Like
There's
it
a
really is.
Some might argue it was a bad question, but please continue.
It's, but I mean, removing House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones, how excited am I for to see A Night of the Seven Kingdoms played out? I would say like obviously very excited. On a scale of 10, I would put it at like a 9. Um,
Nice.
and I love the story for what it is. If you're coming in looking for something at the scale of Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, you're gonna be disappointed because it's not. It's a smaller story. It's meant to be more focused on individual trials and tribulations, and I think that's going to be a refreshing look. We can't just keep getting like massive good against evil wars, right? Like this is going to be a lot more granular, and I'm excited for that.
I think it's a welcome change of pace for the fan base. I think the fan base as a whole might be like, you know what, good, because this book has a scene that will be badass. Like I'm really excited to see how they do it. They could make it like a 30-minute fucking. I won't say anything, but man, these it'd be cool. It'd be cool. But please
Hmm.
continue and then do your excerpt. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm thinking about it.
No, that was all I had. Just very excited. I would say a 9 out of 10, and I think one thing to keep an eye out for because I've been wrong before, but I do think it's going to be hard to mess up the storyline with what has been provided.
Agreed. If they do, like we can't control that. Like if they do,
Yeah.
that's completely on the showrunners and HBO has to go back to the drawing board and like get George like intimately involved. But he has been with the production of this, so let more
All
so
right.
than House of the Dragon. But Chris, read that excerpt because I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so this is from the first book of A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms called The Hedge Knight by George R. R. Martin, of course. We have to do that so that we don't get sued. All
We
right.
love you, George.
Quote, a wall of watchers had gathered around the puppeteers. Dunk shouldered through them, ignoring their curses. A man at arms in the royal livery stepped up to block him. Dunk put a big hand on his chest and shoved, sending the man flailing backwards to sprawl on his arse in the dirt. The puppeteer's stall had been knocked on its side. The fat Dornish woman was on the ground weeping. One man at arms was dangling the puppets of Florian and Jonquil from his hands as another set them afire with a torch. Three more men were opening chests, spilling more puppets on the ground and stamping on them. The dragon puppet was scattered all about them, a wing broken here, its head there, its tail in three pieces. And in the midst of all of it stood Prince Arion, resplendent in a red velvet doublet with long, dagged sleeves, twisting Tanzel's arm in both hands. She was on her knees, pleading with him. Arion ignored her. He forced open her hand and seized one of her fingers. Dunk stood there stupidly, not quite believing what he saw. Then he heard a crack, and Tanzel screamed. One of Arion's men tried to grab him and went flying. Three long strides, then Dunk grabbed the prince's shoulder and wrenched him hard around. His sword and dagger were forgotten, along with everything the old man had ever taught him. His fist knocked Arion off his feet, and the toe of his boot slammed into the prince's belly. When Arion went for his knife, Dunk stepped on his wrist and kicked him again, right in the mouth. He might have kicked him to death right then and there, but the princeling's men swarmed over him. He had a man on each arm and another pounding him across the back. No sooner had he wrestled free one of them than two more were on him. Finally, they shoved him down and pinned his arms and legs. Arion was on his feet again. The prince's mouth was bloody. He pushed inside it with a finger. You've loosened one of my teeth, he complained. So we'll start by breaking all of yours. He pushed his hair from his eyes. You look familiar. You took me for a stable boy. Arion smiled redly. I recall. You refused to take my horse. Why did you throw your life away? For this whore. Tanzel was curled up on the ground, cradling her maimed hand. He gave her a shove with the toe of his boot. She's scarcely worth it. A traitor. The dragon ought never lose. He is mad, thought Dunk, but he is still a prince's son, and he means to kill me. He might have prayed then if he had known a prayer all the way through. but there was no time. There was hardly even time to be afraid. End quote.
Ooh, yeah. Sounds pretty
Yeah.
good. Sounds like we got a douchebag Targaryen in the mix. Also, love the shout out to Jon Snow. There is no time. Love that.
But yeah, no, exciting stuff. Arion Brightflame is his nickname. One of the more insane Targaryens in the history of Targaryens. So excited to see him played out on screen.
And that's a high bar. That is a high bar for
That
insane
is a high
Targaryens.
bar.
There's going to be good ones. There's going to be bad ones. And Dunk is just a guy who does what he finds is right, which is saves that lady from his grasp, but it's also a part of the royal family, you know.
Mhm.
I'm curious to see what happens there. And that's
Me
all part
too.
of the first book, the first novella.
That's yes, sir. And that's
Mm.
the Hedge Knight. And you can get the whole series on Kindle and Night of the Seven Kingdoms. It's 3 books right now. It's $9.99. I'm sure by the time this show comes out, it's gonna be like triple that. So if you're interested in checking it out, now would be the time.
Bye now, George. George, it's a plug, buddy. That's a plug. And that so Arion Brightflame, we did see him casted as well. I honestly was overwhelmed with the amount of Targaryens I saw casted, so I sort of just didn't even try guessing who's going to be what. I just pictured them in yellow wigs. But Chris, thank you for reading that excerpt. I love that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm super pumped. I'm gonna finish reading this again, like the whole series. I just read through a Hedge Knight, getting ready for this episode. But it's very good, and I think it's gonna be a refreshing new look at this world of Ice and Fire for us.
Agreed. And like we said at the jump, Thronies are coming next week, so be ready. All right. Get your suits, get your ties. Listen to them in evening gowns and suits. Definitely going to want to listen to the Thronies dressed up because it is the Oscars of our podcast. It's like
Honestly, we could. I mean, we could do it like if we could post it Sunday night and people could listen in Sunday night.
dude,
They
like
could,
we should
join
go
in instead of Monday
IG
morning.
IG live while we're doing it.
Oh God, that's that's heavy. That's
That's a
heavy.
lot going on
We'll
there.
we'll consider. We'll
We're not
consider.
going to do any of this, guys, just so you know.
Yeah.
You don't need to dress up. You don't need to. But you should. That's what I'm saying is you don't need to, but you should. But you probably won't, but you should have, is what I'm saying.
But we're looking forward to it. Now that'll be fun. We'll have fan awards, we'll have character awards, we'll have possibly company awards in which we could win something. Who knows?
Wow. Who knows? Honestly, there's going to be surprises. There's going to be twists along the way, and there might be some. You're going to want to tune in because there might be some really special guests. There also might not be.
And Aegon's Fallen Angels are gonna perform.
Essentially, it might not also.
All
Got to
right,
say
well,
that.
that's all I got, Sheets.
All right. I don't know anyone from Hedge Knight except for Dunk. So, Dunk, hit me up. I could be your Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
Whips, check out the handle, switch, shoes on swoosh, hitters don't miss. Already just added a ton of y'all to my list. Bitch, death wish, not to be messed with, tested quiz. They shooting shots,